You're right, folks. Welcome back. And if you're new, hello. It's nice to have you. So, we're a fair ways through Wrath Classic now. TOC is underway. People are farming that place to death for their death verdicts, Reigns of the Unliving, and so on for that final showdown atop ICC, which, if the PTR is anything to go by, is only around the corner. Now, maybe you're one of those lucky sods who has gotten the shiny trinket and heroic tier, and you're pretty much done, and you still want to play Classic, but your main is just geared to the teeth. There's no new content for you to fling yourself at. But that itch to log in and be responsible for the minor extinction event is just keeping you up at night. What can you do? Well, I'm going to go over a few things I've been doing lately when I want to play Classic, but my main is essentially out of commission for the week, and raiding on alts just isn't doing it for me. Hopefully, it'll give you a couple of ideas to fill your downtime with. So first up then, Transmog. Now, you may be sat there wondering, why the hell would you want to farm Transmog? We don't have that in Classic. And you would be right, invested viewer. Yet, assuming we go down the obvious path and end up with Cataclysm some point next year, Q2 or Q3 I reckon, then a lot of old world items and bits of equipment will no longer be available. Your blue dungeon sets, tier 0.5, Benediction, Rock de la, all of that gone. I personally really like the Dark Mantle set, and as someone who didn't have a rogue in Classic, because the classes I played were Hunter, Paladin, Druid, and Warrior, I didn't have it, and I didn't get my rogue up until late TBC, so now is kind of the perfect time to go back through those over the dungeons, get the drops, and work towards my tier 0.5. And the sooner you do this, the better, as drops are never guaranteed, and the more time you give yourself to get the base items and then actually go through the quest chain, because it's a bloody long one, the better. Same goes for my priest. I didn't have a priest until TBC, and I never got Benediction originally. It's something that I've kind of always admired from afar. But with its source and related quests being removed in Cataclysm, now is the only chance I'll have to go back and get one. And each week, that's what I'm doing when I kill Major Domo, praying to the gods that it's the bloody Eye of Divinity and not the Petrified Leaf. Same goes for the troll raids, Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman. In Cataclysm, they get a full revamp, and a lot of items and unique appearances were lost to the ether. So if you want to dual-wield Hikari Warblades on your back, now is the time. Ultimately, if there is an item or appearance you really like from Vanilla that is going to be lost to time with the Cataclysm, get hunting for it as soon as possible. A drop is never guaranteed, as I said, and waiting until the final patch or phase may not be enough. And this isn't just limited to those items and whatnot that will be removed in Cataclysm. If there's a particular set that takes your fancy for an old raid, get cracking. You're not going to be on such a tight timeline with, say, tier 5 or tier 6 that you might be with tier 0.5, but if you've got nothing else on, you might as well make some headway. Then there is mount farming. Now for me, mount farming is a bit of a dangerous topic. On retail, it was my go-to activity outside of raiding for the better part of 15 years. It was only around BFA that I just outright lost my love for it, along with many aspects of the game, in all fairness, because the sheer volume was just suffocating. Every patch came with 20 recos of the same body model, and they were rarely that interesting. This was an itch that reared its head again during TBC, however, particularly with mounts that I never got the first time, like the ZG mounts or the Amani Warbear. The Zillion Tiger was something that I farmed every week in Original Wrath, but was just very unlucky and never saw it before Kata hit the first time round. In Classic Wrath, though, different story. I've got 4 of the bloody things, and if I'm ever bored and have a spare moment, I'll happily take yet another character in and see if my luck persists. But the ZG mounts in particular are something that will become unobtainable if we go into Cataclysm, because as mentioned in the Transmog section, the raid gets revamped and the mounts are replaced by 2 new and arguably less interesting versions. So if you want a tiger or a raptor, get started sooner rather than later, because as I said before, a drop is never guaranteed. But this doesn't even have to be for mounts that won't be around in Cataclysm. Perhaps you've seen someone on a shiny white Wartol book and you want your own. Maybe you want another Drake or another Ray, but because you can't get a 310 speed version, you've put it off because your Proto Drake is just that little bit faster. Fair enough, but now's the time to go back to Outland, because there will be far fewer people around than there was in TBC, so depending on how you approach the reps, it could only take you a couple of days start to finish, which means when the Cataclysm does come round, and that 310 speed is then applied to all your winged beauties, you can soar through the skies of Azeroth on your shiny new Nether Drake. And if you don't have a 310 Proto Drake clogging up your mount tab, then as I'm making this, you've got 4 you can go for. If you're a collector, then you can try and get all of them, or if there's only one you want for the looks, or if you aren't fussed which one you get and you just want the dragon that can go zoom, check your achievements. You might only be 1 or 2 away from a massive T-Rex with wings crammed into your mailbox, because once Cataclysm hits, 310% mounted speed will become something that you can purchase for a measly 5k gold. However, if you have a 310% mount going into Cataclysm, that character gets it for free, which, as a Brit, can't say no to a free thing. The only mount I would recommend you hold off on, unless you are desperate for it now and want to be able to say you did it the old-fashioned way, is the Winter Spring Frost Saber. In Cataclysm, that whole reputation gets a facelift, and instead of being numerous tedious quests for minute reputation gains, it's redesigned to be more in line with the Horde counterpart, the Venomhide Ravasaur, which requires you to complete 20 daily quests alongside a negligible gold cost as well as some vanilla materials. On the subject of the Ravasaur though, if you're a Horde, go for it. The dailies are pretty simple but fun. You get to raise yourself a raptor from a teeny tiny hatchling all the way into a massive prehistoric monster capable of carrying a 10-foot tall cowman into battle. But there's also the Ravenlord, Swift White Hawk Strider, Rivendare's Charger, Ashes of Alar, and so on. Granted, they all require different amounts of effort to get, but if you're going to spend your time doing something, might as well be on something you'll get to keep using going into the next expansion and beyond. And whilst doing this, and the previous item on the list, come to think of it, you'll be making a bit of gold. Thinking back to when I farmed a Rivendare's Charger on my DK during the Wrath pre-patch, it took me a couple of days before it dropped. Now, that's not non-stop farming, it was in between other things, but there was some burst of a couple of hours here and there. And during it all, I made about 2,000 gold just from that dungeon alone. Not spectacular numbers by any stretch, but something you will notice, particularly if you're not flush with coin. Alternatively, you can go play Era or Hardcore. Fairly recently, Era got this weird injection of life, so there are now servers that are alive and kicking once again, and definitely worth going back to if you fancy wasting a few hours on that patented classic grind, and particularly if you never played it when it released. It obviously won't be the same, but there is still something there. Leveling alone is a hell of a journey and well worth the experience at least once. And it's unlikely you'll be done anytime soon, especially if you just log on once in a while for a couple of hours here and there. You'll just end up with this little project to work on, which can be pretty enjoyable. And unlike later expansions and certainly retail, leveling in Wrath Classic is as much a part of the game as dungeons, raiding, and PvP are. And I doubt you'll overly feel like you're missing out because you aren't immediately decked in Tier 3, rocking an Ashbringer or an Atiesh. But if and when you hit that legendary level 60, there are plenty of groups doing runs for all levels of content. So if you fancy getting a few pieces of Tier 1 or Tier 2, you shouldn't have an issue doing so. Currently, I've got a Tauren Shaman I'm slowly chipping away at when I fancy a bit of Era. I've always enjoyed leveling and doing dungeons, but frankly I've leveled so much in Wrath recently, it just doesn't appeal. But doing things in the ye olde fashion scratched that particular itch. Only downside for me is I chose a PvP server and grew to regret my life choices at around level 30, and my hate for rogues has only grown tenfold. But Shaman was something I never got round to until TBC, so trying out Vanilla Enhancement has been a grand and mostly fun time. There's always something to be said for Vanilla Era as a whole, and it's well worth a dabble. Only thing I'd say is that there were a hell of a lot more GDKPs flying around than there were back then, as far as I can recall anyway, so be warned. If a different kind of classic experience is what you're after, then by the time this goes up, hardcore servers would have been up and running for a few days. I'll also be streaming it, so hint, hint, links below. This is definitely an experience that by its very nature is catered to the more experienced WoW player, simply due to the fact that one iffy mistake and you are sent back to square one. Doesn't mean if you never played Classic or anything like that, you can't give it a crack. I highly recommend it. It's good fun, and the ever-looming threat of death somewhat keeps you on your toes. But if you're looking for a more casual and relaxed experience in an environment where you can royally cock up, learn from your mistakes and go again, this may not be for you, though you will definitely be doing that in hardcore. But it's a new challenge, technically. Obviously, the community event has been a thing for a while now, but with the servers being new, everyone's starting from scratch, so definitely worth getting in as soon as you can. Especially if, like me, you were a bit late to the hardcore thing and didn't know where to begin, so now's the time to take some deep breaths and expect to scream at your screen a few times over before you hit the jackpot with a character that manages to make it all the way. You might even drag a few mates with you. A few of my guildies are going to be giving it a crack, so it'll definitely be nice to do it with some familiar faces. And assuming we aren't all dead within the first 15 minutes, we should have enough people to do dungeons with, which will be nice. Also means if I get someone killed in a dungeon, I will never, ever, ever be allowed to forget it. And even if you dabbled in the community event, there will be some changes to how official hardcore works. You've got things like the Duel to the Death system, which I am sure will attract all sorts of top-shelf individuals and definitely not insane degenerates. Then there is Lawmaster. Now this is a biggie and a bit cheaty because I haven't actually started this yet myself. It's something I'm planning to do, but for me it's deciding which character I want to do it on. You might wonder, why not your main? Well, my DK is my main right now, but he may not be in whatever we get after Wrath. I like to change things up from time to time. DK is definitely my favourite class by a long margin and is always a strong contender for a main, but I've played a Frost DK on and off for years, so I may fancy playing a class I've never actually mained, and despite my long history with WoW, there are quite a few classes that have never been anything but ults for me. There's also the fact my main is a DK. He is so far behind near enough every other character I play in regards to quests completed just by virtue of being that class. It would take me so much longer than if I went with my Paladin or Hunter, which were my most played characters in Vanilla Classic. I could do my Shaman, who was my main in TBC and who I leveled via questing in the pre-patch, and as such he's got a fair number done as well. So I am currently just deciding which tune would make this less tiresome, shall we say. But not one that is perhaps so far down my played list it would be completely pointless. You, however, may not face this conundrum. Maybe you've played the same character since launch and you're actually not too far off. In your downtime, you can just chip away at it bit by bit. It's definitely not going anywhere. But the achievement itself will only go on to get bigger and more bloated as the game progresses and each expansion is added to the prerequisites. So in theory, if you want to do as little as possible for this achievement, you might want to get onto it sooner rather than later. Or perhaps you do what I do, and you switch up your main every expansion or every other expansion. But when your main is your main, you do everything on it, so you don't mind going back and clearing out the quest log for this achievement. Great, have fun. And even if you aren't over keen on ults or you're relatively new to WoW, only got 1 or 2 characters, something like that, this might be a good excuse to go back through the old content and see it all. Experience quest chains and storylines you never have, and perhaps even uncover routes that you'd like to take a new ult through. It could just broaden your overall knowledge of the game and maybe even teach you a thing or two about this world of Warcraft we call a home away from home. The rewards for this aren't overly mind-blowing by any stretch, but the title you get, Lawmaster, is pretty swish in my opinion, and definitely cooler than the tabard you get. I'm not knocking it, it's a big old quest marker on your chest, pretty distinct, and there's no way in hell it'll be confused for anything other than what it is, but I just think the title is the cooler reward of the two. Also, similarly to what I said about transmogs and mounts, you'll definitely make some gold doing this. Maybe not masses for the early vanilla quests, but definitely the higher level stuff. TBC and Wrath quests will see your coin purse expand by several thousand gold for sure. Finish then! A few smaller points, honourable mentions if you will, at the very least something worth making a note of. Professions. Not everyone gets on with them for one reason or another. Personally, I like doing them as I go, level them with a character. Others just ignore them outright, and some like to focus on them after they've hit cap. If you're the latter and have been putting it off, now is a great time. Generally, materials are a hell of a lot cheaper than they were at the start of Wrath, so depending on your profession, it shouldn't overly break the bank, and if you play your cards right, you might just start making some money back from the damn things. Most of my toons have their profession sorted, but a couple of alts lag behind, and I've been using this downtime to sort them out, particularly gathering professions. put some Netflix on, grab a decent cuppa, and it's a relaxing way to spend an hour or two. Or you could clean out your bank. I do this at least once a patch. Random crap just starts accumulating in the banks of all the tunes that I play regularly. Mainly it's gear that I've stuck in there that I might need in some random, very specific event. But a new phase comes out that then makes that gear obsolete, and it's just taking up space. Now, you might want to keep it because it looks cool, which is valid. My Paladin and Shaman are hoarding their tier 6 gear. But just get rid of it, it's just going to clog things up. And this extends to bags as well. It's kind of like organising your desk. You may wonder, why the hell should I? But when you do, it's weirdly satisfying. And the last thing, play the auction house. This could be its own big section, but I'm not much for Goblin. That being said, I know a few folk whose entire existence outside of raiding is just spent making money on the auction house, and in some cases, eye-watering amounts. Now, that's partly down to the fact the economy is shot to shit, but they know what they're doing, and it shows. There are plenty of add-ons out there that can help you. Auctioneer, Trade Skill Master, and others I'm sure, but those two I know because, like I said, not a goblin. You can then use all that newfound wealth to furnish all your captains with a Tundra Mount if you like. So there we are, the things I'd recommend you give a go in your downtime. And just because we're in the farm stage of a patch, it doesn't mean there aren't activities for you to go and try. After all, an MMO is about the little things just as much as the big bombastic boss battles. But that's me. Let me know your own thoughts and what you do in your downtime below. If you'd be so kind as to like, sub, share your pals and so on, that'd be grand. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I am streaming some hardcore, so do drop in and say hello. I don't bite and I do enjoy chatting to new folk. Anyway, have a good one folks. Bye for now.